Morning students, in the continuation of your class 10th biology, last video we discussed about the reproductive structure of plant, that is the flower. So in that part we discussed that in this flower there are four whorls. Four whorls means it is two essential and two non-essential parts of the flower are there. Essential parts means that will participate in this process of fertilization, like it is the essential part that is participate in the process of fertilization, like this male part and female reproductive part, stamen and pistil or carpel, that will participate in this process of fertilization, so it is called essential part. Whereas those parts that do not participate directly in this process of fertilization, these are called non-essential parts, like calyx and corolla. Okay, and this male part, it consists of two parts, that is the anther and filament. So anther contain the pollen grains, and this pollen grains have to be transferred to the style for the process of fertilization. Okay, because this pistil contain the ovule, and this ovule is the part where the female gamete is present. So this pollen grain has the male nucleus and the ovule has the female nucleus. So male nucleus has to be fused with the female nucleus. For that reason, the pollen grains has to be transferred from this stigma, from this anther to the stigma of a flower. And this process is called as this pollination. So in this part we will see what is the different steps of this pollination and what is the fertilization. So it is the pollination. Seed is the stigma and it is the anther. Anther that contain the pollen grains. So the pollen grains has to be transferred from this anther to the stigma. And this process is called as pollination. And there are two types of pollinations are there. Okay. First is called self-pollination and second is called cross-pollination. So we will discuss it later, but then first of all we can see what is this pollination. So this is the case of this self-pollination and cross-pollination. Okay. So this is the flower and it is consist of this male and female reproductive part. Here also the male and female reproductive part, but here you can see there are two different plants are there. Okay, there are two different plants. So if the pollination takes place from anther to the stigma of the same flower, anther to the stigma of the same flower, this case is called, this is the self-pollination. But if the pollen grains from one flower reaches to the stigma of the same to the another flower of different plant, then it is called cross-pollination. Okay, see, the pollen grains are transferred from here to here. It is the self-pollination. But here in this case, you can see the pollen grains from this flower are transferring to the stigma of this flower. So it is called this cross-pollination. Okay, so this is the process of pollination. So what is the benefit of this pollination? Because we discussed that male nucleus has to fuse with the female nucleus, and male nucleus is present inside the anther and the female nucleus is found inside the ovule, means that is the pistil. So anther से निकल के pollen grains को कहाँ पहुँचना है? स्टिग्मा पे. तो ये स्टिग्मा पे पहुँचने का ही जो प्रोसेस है उसको हम कह रहे हैं पॉलिनेशन. ओके, और पॉलिनेशन में क्या होता है कि जो मेल न्यूक्लियस है जो किसके अंदर प्रेजेंट है? एंथर के, वो किसको फ्यूज करना है? फीमेल न्यूक्लियस दैट इज प्रेजेंट इनसाइड द पिस्टिल. इसी तो जब तक वहाँ पे वो मेल न्यूक्लियस उस स्टिग्मा पे नहीं पहुँचेगा, तो क्यों, चूँकि फर्टिलाइजेशन कहाँ पे होना है? इनसाइड दिस ओवरी. तो ओवरी पे फर्टिलाइजेशन के लिए फीमेल न्यूक्लियस का उस मेल न्यूक्लियस तक पहुँचना जरूरी है. तो दिस प्रोसेस इज डन विद द हेल्प ऑफ दिस पॉलिनेशन. सो इट इज़ द बेनिफिट ऑफ दिस pollination कि it helps in this process of fertilization. Okay, so this is the types of pollination and these are the different agents of pollination. Agents means अभी हमने डिस्कस किया कि pollen grain को एंथर से निकल के स्टिग्मा पे पहुंचना है. तो वो पहुंचने का जो प्रोसेस है वो किसी न किसी एजेंट के थ्रू होता है. वन ऑफ द एजेंट एंड वेरी कॉमन एजेंट इज द विंड. देन इट इज वाटर. देन इट कैन बी एन एनिमल और इंसेक्ट. Like you have seen, the different insects, they come to the flower to get the nectar that is present inside the flower in the nectaris. So insects are also one of the agent. Birds are also one of the agent of this pollination, and other also like bat and elephants are also can be a pollinating agent. So but the common pollination agent is the air, wind and water and insects. Okay. So this is the wind. Wind is one of the agent of this pollination. This is the water. Water is also one of the agent of pollination. These are the animals that can be an agent of pollination. These are the birds that can be agent of pollination. Human beings also pollinate the different flowers. Okay. So these are the this is the pollination. These are the insects that are helping in this process of pollination. We discussed if these insects like butterfly or honeybee, they come to the flower and along with these wings or on these legs, they carry the pollen grain from one flower to another flower. See, this is the structure of ovary. It is the structure of an ovary, and ovary contain this ovule. See, this is the stigma of a flower, and these are the pollen grains. Okay, just we discussed कि fertilization has to be takes place inside the inside the ovule, and ovule contain the female nucleus. तो this is the pollen grain. इसके अंदर क्या प्रेजेंट है? मेल न्यूक्लियस प्रेजेंट है. तो यहाँ से इस न्यूक्लियस को प्रेजेंट नीचे निकल के कहाँ पे जाना है? It has to travel to the ovule that is present inside the ovary. So that is done by the help of this formation of pollen tube. Okay, and this process of fusion of male and female gamete is called fertilization. Fusion of male gamete with female gamete is called fertilization. So this is the stigma. See, finally the pollen has to reach from this place to inside the ovule, and that will be done by the formation of pollen tube. See, one tube is formed that is arise from this stigma, then it will move to the style, and finally it will reach to the ovary. Ovary means that is containing the ovules. See, this is the pollen tube. This is the pollen tube that is formed. See, this is the form, this pollen tube, and it is reaching to the ovary. See, this is the structure of an ovary. See, it contains the different ovules. These are the ovules that are placed over here. So fertilization takes place inside these ovules. Okay, the fertilization takes place inside these ovules. See, this is the pollen tube through which this pollen grains, rather it is the gametes, male and female nucleus that are being transferred from this stigma to the ovary. There are two types of nucleus is there inside the male. That is, one is called tube nucleus, and one is that is the male nucleus or generative nucleus that is present in the pollen grain. So this generative nucleus or male nucleus has to fuse with the female nucleus. There are two nucleus where the fertilization will be there inside the ovary also. That is called this egg cell and central cell, where the fertilization will takes place. So there are two male gametes that is from present inside the anther will fuse to the two nucleus of the ovule. That is, one is egg cell, second is that is the central cell. Okay, so since there is two places where the fertilization will takes place, so it is called this double fertilization. See, this is the structure of a typical ovule. There are total 7 cells, 3 up, 3 down and 1 in the center having 2 nuclei. Okay, these are called this antipodal cells. These 3 cells are called antipodal cells. These 2 cells are, and in this center this is the egg cell and this is the polar nuclei. So fertilization will be there with this egg cell that is in the center and with this polar nuclei that is present in the center of this ovule, and it is containing 2 nucleus. So one gamete, male gamete, will reach to the egg cell and fuse with this nucleus, and one nucleus of male will fuse with this 2 nucleus of the center cell. So this is called this triple fusion. Here it is triple fusion because 2 nucleus are there already that is present inside the egg cell. One will reach from the male nucleus. So there will be triple fusion. So the fusion of the fusion of 2 gametes or the male and female cell is called syngamy. See, sometimes it is asked why it is called this double fertilization. तो fertilization क्या है? It is the fusion of male and female gametes. तो देखो 2 मेल गैमीट आए कहाँ से? पोलन ग्रेन से, और उन्होंने फ्यूज़ किया किससे? एक इस एग सेल से और एक इस पोलर न्यूक्लियाई से. ठीक है, एग सेल में एक मेल न्यूक्लियस और एक फीमेल न्यूक्लियस हो गया, फ्यूज़ हो गया. दिस प्रोसेस कॉल्ड एज सिनगैमी. ओके, एक फर्टिलाइजेशन यहाँ पे हो गया, दूसरा फर्टिलाइजेशन होगा विद दिस पोलर न्यूक्लियाई. देयर आर 2 न्यूक्लियाई, 2 न्यूक्लियस, एक मेल गैमीट आएगा और इनसे फ्यूज़ कर जाएगा. ठीक है, और कुल मिला के यहाँ पे 3 न्यूक्लियस हो जाएंगे, इसीलिए इसको हम कहते हैं ट्रिपल फ्यूजन. इट इज कॉल्ड दिस ट्रिपल फ्यूजन. यहाँ पे ट्रिपल फ्यूजन हो गया, यहाँ पे नॉर्मल फ्यूजन हो गया, और 2 जगह फर्टिलाइजेशन हो रहा है, एक एग सेल के साथ और एक पोलर न्यूक्लियाई के साथ. इसीलिए प्लांट्स में जो फर्टिलाइजेशन होता है इसको हम कहते हैं डबल फर्टिलाइजेशन. एंड आफ्टर दिस फर्टिलाइजेशन इट फॉर्म दिस जाइगोट. इट फॉर्म दिस जाइगोट. See, after fertilization the zygotes form an embryo. See, it is the structure of an embryo. Embryo further develop into seed. Okay, sorry, this ovules are developed into seed and embryo develop into a fruit. It is also very important question कि after this fertilization what happens to the embryo and ovules. तो एम्ब्रियो किस में कन्वर्ट हो जाता है? इनटू, सॉरी, ओवरी इज कन्वर्टेड इनटू फ्रूट एंड दिस ओव्यूल्स आर कन्वर्टेड इनटू सीड्स. See, this is the petals, sepals, stamen, and it is style and carpel. So these are the 4 whorls. See, this is the germination that takes place into the seed. So if we will see the structure of a seed, then what we will find? See, this is all about this fertilization. So something that we have to remember, we have to revise it again, कि fertilization से पहले क्या आता है? It is pollination. Pollination is the process of transfer of anther, pollen grain from anther to the stigma. It is called this pollination. Then after, this pollen grain contain 2 male nucleus. That is, one is pollen tube nucleus that is help in the formation of pollen tube, and another is called this generative nucleus. यही generative nucleus जब fertilization होता है तो क्या होता है? वो divide हो जाता है into 2 male nuclei. यही 2 male nuclei को पहुंचना है कहाँ पे? into the embryo sac that is present inside the ovule, जिसके अंदर 7 cells हैं, 3 antipodal cells, 2 chelial cells और एक बीच में egg nucleus, और सेंटर में एक पोलर न्यूक्लियाई या सेंट्रल सेल दैट इज कंटेनिंग 2 न्यूक्लियस. सो वन ऑफ द मेल न्यूक्लियस विल फ्यूज विद द एग सेल एंड वन ऑफ द मेल न्यूक्लियस विल फ्यूज टू द सेंट्रल सेल. बिकॉज ऑफ दैट इट इज कॉल्ड डबल fertilization, and this fertilization of the male nuclei with the egg cell is called syngamy, and this fusion of one male nuclei with the center cell is called triple fusion. और इस तरह से जो ओवरी थी आपकी वो कन्वर्ट हो गई फ्रूट में, और जो आपका ओव्यूल्स थे वो कन्वर्ट हो गए आपके सीड में. ओके, सो दिस इज ऑल अबाउट दिस फर्टिलाइजेशन इन द प्लांट्स. ओके स्टूडेंट्स, तो इसको एक बार अच्छे से आप लोग रिवाइज कर लीजिएगा, और इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास वी विल डिस्कस अबाउट द रिप्रोडक्शन इन ह्यूमन बींग्स. देन थैंक यू.